afternoon. How is everybody? A little warm? My name is Jane Cox. I'm the Chief of Cultural Resources, and we'll go ahead and get started on this nice hot afternoon. I thought since we were going to be talking about history today, we might start with a little shout out to someone from history that I think is very important. Willis Carrier, who invented the air conditioning in 1902. We could give him a round of applause. So thank you so much for braving this heat. A couple housekeeping items, if you can silence your phones. We will have a multimedia presentation today, so I'm looking forward to that. So today, we are so excited to share with the public for the very first time a heritage trail titled African American Voices, Memories, and Places, a Four Rivers Heritage Trail. This multimedia virtual trail includes more than 200 historic sites covering some 370 years of African American heritage and history in Anne Arundel County's Four Rivers. To kick off our afternoon screening, I'd like to invite County Executive Stewart Pittman up to say a few words before we get started.
Thank you, Jane. And Janice Hayes Williams, who is somewhere around here, I also want to thank because she came to me and told me that this was going on, and then I sat down with Jane and Janice and everybody, and we talked about how to make sure that what you're going to see and what's about to be, which is online, it's about to be released online, is seen by a lot of people. And I guess when I came into office, I knew that we had to do more to teach Anne Arundel County about the history of the African American experience here. The African American experience is what built Anne Arundel County. And I think the African American population was about double what it is now at the end of the 200 or 300 years of the institution of slavery here. And so this county was built by African Americans. And a lot of the history that we hear about when you go into Annapolis and you see history, they're old buildings that were owned by the people who were the politicians, were the plantation owners, and they're these grand buildings that people go to see, built by African Americans. And rarely do we get to see the history of the people who built this county. And when I started to look at the website, I got a sneak peek of it. There were so many sites that the question was, how are we going to present this in less than a day? And I think that you all have figured out a way to do that. But the reason that I feel that this history is so important for our county is that by knowing it, it informs our future. And I think if anybody who reads the paper at all knows that in this county, students and adults have been probably more in the last few years. We know hate crimes and bigotry and the incidence of hate crimes have increased greatly since the last presidential election, for sure. And the most recent one was down in Mayo, on the Mayo Peninsula, and it was a spray-painted depiction of a lynching of a human being hanging from the branch of a tree. And it was on a piece of property that used to be county. It's an old tennis court. It's now used for skateboarding. The Mayo Community Association manages it. And they actually went out, somebody from the community, with another can of spray paint and spray painted over it because there was no way to cover it up. Fortunately, the Mayo community has come a long way and has condemned the act, and it didn't get a lot of press at first, but I'm very proud that Chief Altamari, our police chief, immediately said, let's put out a $1,000 reward to catch the person who did this, the way we do for murder and rape and other major crimes. And I thought about it, and I thought, that is absolutely appropriate, that the practice of lynchings was terrorism in this county, done in this county, to African Americans to terrorize people. And the way that our government handles terrorism, acts of terrorism, and threats of terrorism against Americans is that that no stone is left unturned, that all the resources of government are put into catching the perpetrators, the terrorists, and bringing them to justice. And so when it is a threat of terrorism against African Americans as opposed to just Americans, there should be the same effort by government to bring that person to justice. And I think that there are young people in this county who don't understand the history, so they don't understand the impact, and they don't understand the pain and the suffering. And so this history needs to be brought into our schools. This history needs to be seen by everybody. But I also don't want people to expect to see only the bad side of the African American experience in Anne Arundel County, because I know that what you're going to see is communities that exemplified what it means to be a community, some of the most generous and compassionate people that you've ever seen in the world that are going to be interviewed in this, and some of the work done in the schools in Bates and Ralph Bunch and the segregated African American schools with some of the best education, I think, with the least resources, some of the best education we've ever seen in this county. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this presentation, and I know that this is just a start. This is a part of the county, and we're going to get to the rest.
Thank you very much. You know, as historians, in my work with the Cultural Resources Division, we tried to preserve the historic resources in our county. And I think, as Mr. Pittman just shared, history is important to the present, and what we're about to see today really goes to that, looking at how history has informed our community and informed our entire county. And I think you'll really enjoy seeing some of the presentations. This multimedia virtual tour, it covers more than 200 historic sites. It includes historic buildings, archaeological sites, historic cemeteries, communities, and places of remembrance that tells us about many aspects of the 370 years of African American heritage and history in Anne Arundel County. Sites represented here include public and private properties, some of which you can physically visit, and we've also included sites that don't physically survive anymore on the landscape, but they remain important places to tell stories about this African American heritage. The project, funded in part by the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority, it contains sites within the Four Rivers Heritage Area, which stretches from Sandy Point and the Bay Bridge to the north, along the county's bay side, through the rivers on the east, along Route 2 and Solomon's Island Road to the west, and south to the Calvert County line. Four Rivers is one of 13 historic heritage areas in the state. These heritage areas are important tools because they help promote heritage tourism in the county, and the Four Rivers brings together individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and governments who form partnerships to preserve and to showcase the best of Maryland's history and its traditions. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Carol Benson, who is the Heritage Area Director for Four Rivers. If she can wave her hand. Thank you very much for your support. The project, in addition to creating a virtual tour of the heritage area, also seeks to bolster the official inventory of African American heritage sites in the county, so that citizens and visitors and students can gain a broader and more inclusive understanding of the county's history. Our office did an audit in 2015 of our inventory of historic properties, these places that we can protect and preserve with our laws, and we found that only about 8% of the sites that were in our inventory represented that African American heritage. So we are really hoping that this, in addition to being a way of raising awareness, will help us do a better job physically protecting the resources, the historic sites that still survive. So ensuring that the county inventory is representative and inclusive of the county's population, both the historic populations and modern populations, will allow us to better protect all aspects of the county's heritage. This MHAA grant was awarded to the Lost Towns Project, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving and promoting awareness and research about the county's history and archaeology. I'd like to take a moment here to recognize the president of Lost Towns Project, Sherry Marsh-Johns, and the secretary is here as well, Janice Marcusic. Thank you for your work on the board. The consultants hired under this grant worked in partnership with county staff to undertake the research needed to bring this project to life. Many of the stops and the stories came to the virtual life through fairly conventional means. The team has culled old historic inventory forms, we've looked closely at historic maps, we've sought out new archival documents, newspaper articles, and old photographs. We reviewed archaeological discoveries and even gathered local family names from information found in the historic cemeteries throughout the area. But where the project really came to life was when we started asking people to remember and to share their stories from the 20th century. With these oral history interviews, we start to get a firsthand account of local history in our community. And from there, when we started the oral history interview process, the number of places, sites, and stories to include in this story in this project just exploded. The oral histories tell us a rich, much deeper history in many ways than a conventional archives can. I'd like to share an excerpt from an email we received from Ted and Betty Mack. Ted Mack was the chairman of the African American Heritage Commission for the state. Betty Mack was founder of the North Arundel Cultural Preservation Society. And they shared these thoughts a few months ago when we gave them a sneak preview of the project. They've been incredibly supportive and provided really quite sage advice throughout this program. And this is what they shared with us. The real value in this work can be realized when the accounts are recorded in the voices of the storytellers. The history book must become their story book. When the words of the storytellers are not recorded in their own voice, ownership is minimized or worse, denied. Hours of recordings of personal and community memories enrich the reader's mind, reveal valuable personal accounts, and reward the vocal participants and their communities with an important identity and pride. While we can't time travel and capture oral histories from deep, long ago history, we have managed in this project to collect over 50 new oral history interviews. While we've included short clips and vignettes of the interviews included in the trail, some of which you'll see today, the full videos and transcripts will be archived in partnership with the Anne Arundel County Public Library System, so you can go and look at listen to the entire interview, which will be a really exciting add-on to this program. I know excitement is building to see this program. We've got a couple of preview clips that we'll be sharing with you. But before we get to the reveal, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge a few other people. As I noted earlier, the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority was the funder for this program. Jen Ruffner is the administrator, and the MHA board. We'd like to thank them. I'd like to again thank Dr. Carol Benson for her support throughout this project. We hosted 3 stakeholder meetings at the very beginning of this process 18 months ago. And our keynote presenters for those events included our own Janice Hayes Williams, Dr. Dale Green, and Mr. Tony Spencer, who I think is in the audience today. You can give a wave. Throughout, they, along with a few other folks, Gertrude Makel, Carl Snowden, Carol Heinzen Jr., among many others, helped us identify what compelling stories were out there, where the important places were, and they helped connect our team to make sure we could capture their stories. Now I'd like to introduce the team that actually brought this project to life over the last 18 months. Ms. Lindra Marshall-Pratt. You can stand up. Lindra was the project's oral historian. She is a renowned genealogist, has worked with the Kunta Kinte Foundation, and was most recently appointed vice chair to the Reginald F. Lewis Museum Board of Directors. I've also found that she appears to be related to about 60% of the people we've interviewed somehow. She's related to everybody. It's amazing. I'd like to also acknowledge Dr. John Killey, the historian and project manager for the Lost Towns Project. Ms. Exit Grubb. She is our cartography, mapping, GIS, and map story technical guru. She's the one that made the magic happen on the screen. Ms. Darian Beverungen, who is the county's historic sites planner, helped with all aspects of the research. Anastasia Poulos, who is locked in the control room, helping us with the technology. She is the county's archaeological sites planner. And our website and GIS specialist. We also had the assistance of countless volunteers who assisted with content development and editing. I'd also like to thank our interns with the project, Judy Hannon, who's also here. Wave, Judy. And Christine Dunham and Jessica Kelly. And finally, I'd like to thank Mr. Anthony Smoot for all of his videography and editing skills. He's behind the camera now. The real heroes, however, are those who took the time to share their memories and their knowledge. Many thought they didn't have a story to tell, but as you will find today, their stories are compelling and important, and we hope we've captured some of them here. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to Ms. Lindra, who will share a few thoughts on the oral history work, and then start a few previews so you can see just what this project looks like.
Good evening and welcome. This is the day. We are finally going to show you guys everything that we've been doing behind the scenes, and we hope you enjoyed as much as you did when we stopped by each location, each county, not county, but each community, and sat down with you and allowed you to tell your stories. Many thanks to all who participated in the Civil Rights or History Project and are attending this event today. So thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause. My role today is going to be very brief, and I'm going to share just a little bit about why this project matters to the community and a few thoughts on the value of oral histories. When asked of a scholar to share their thoughts on oral histories, he shared, it's to capture in the spirit the history that has not gone recorded. It's not a testimony, just a testimony. It is a testimony within the context of history. Who better to tell that story than each one of you, the people who are living today? Today, I'm not going to get too technical, so I'll keep it simple, but here's some of the questions you need to ask. What is oral history? What is the importance of oral history? What is the value of oral history? What are the advantages of oral history? And what is the Oral History Project? What does it really matter to the community? Oral history is the collection and study of historical information about individuals, families, important events, and everyday life using audio tapes, videotapes, and transcriptions of planned interviews. These interviews are conducted with people like yourself who participated in or observed past events and whose memories and perceptions of these are to be preserved as an annual record for future generations. Preserving oral history is a critical first phase of genealogical research and data preservation, because those who provided the information are generally older members and of the family and community. Both their lives and their memories are at risk of being lost to time. And I'll pause here and say that we have been blessed with this project because we have interviewed people as young as 65 years old and as old as 103 years old. Our histories are one tool that genealogists and historians uses to capture and preserve information, gain first-hand insight into historical events, and record the promoting experiences and testimonies of members that would otherwise be lost. Oral history captures individuals' everyday perspectives, unique life experiences, and speech patterns, the use of languages, and contemporary mannerisms. Oral history enhances a genealogist and historian's broad range of historical resources, including primary and secondary sources use to reference the past. Every voice matters, and an oral history project such as the Lost Towns Civil Rights Project ensures that members' voices are heard and their stories affirmed and preserved. So we recorded interviews with members throughout Anne Arundel County and captured their reflections and perspectives during the Civil Rights era. It is a great feeling when you can commit yourself, your organization, or your community to an oral history project. It is a great privilege to record someone's life story and a great responsibility to care for the story in a preservation environment. So with that said, welcome again to the virtual trail of African American Voices, Memories, and Places, a Four Rivers Heritage Trail. Again, our goal was to find those stories and supporting content and bring them to life. So please know that this journey has only begun. Now journey with me on a virtual tour of the Anne Arundel County African American history and culture. Of all of the Maryland counties, perhaps the one wrapped in the heaviest cloak of mystery is that of Anne Arundel County. The county is made up of 1,066 cities, towns, neighborhoods, subdivisions, and other populated places. If asked where I come from, I'm proud to say I'm from South County, Lothian, Maryland, a place that was once called Lebanon, God's country. Then it changed to the Ark Village, then the Ark, then Mount Zion, and now known as Lothian. So, with that said, I'm not here to tell my story today, but I'm here to share yours. And some of the many stories that we were able to get was that of Carl Snowden during the segregation period at Annapolis High School. Deborah Barbara, who's not here today, her experience with participating in sit-ins. Daniel Easton's experience, having to serve from a window on the side of Topside Restaurant, and also his experience of visiting and attending an event in Washington, D.C. with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Betty Turner, who's been one of the biggest stars in this whole project, who shared her stories of working at Lady Ellen's Beauty Corner in Galesville and being paid $1 or $2 per head. And when she raised the price to $5, she lost business and had to seek work elsewhere. Mr. Mons Harris, Mrs. Alice Wright, Mrs. Alma Cropper, and Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles, who shared what it was like growing up in Camp Road and the rich history that's in that area. Tammy Carroll Hall shared the rich history of Mount Zion, the church, the Roosevelt schools, the cemetery, the community, and the families. She also shared stories about the Untouchables, ball team, and the Upshot General Store, which was converted in the evenings to a juke joint. And then we have the Glenn sisters, and they shared stories about Matthews Park and how their family had more than 200 people on a weekend that participated in their great barbecues. And I'll never forget this one because as we were leaving that interview, Mr. Smoot said, "I'm going to put you all to the test." So he ordered potato salad and pies and some other stuff, and I believe they delivered. Is that correct, Mr. Smoot?
Yes, they did.
Mr. Brogdon shared his sports experience at Bates High School, and then he went on to teach there. Ms. Gertrude Maker shared the African American history of the church, community, Roosevelt School, and the Hot Sox. And the list goes on and on and on. So I thank you to all of you all that participated. And here we are today, getting ready to show a piece of the trail. So the first stop of this tour is St. Margaret's, stop number 3. Sandy Point Lighthouse, 1864, presented by Omar, is that Saeed or Said? Saeed, come on down.
Sandy Point, Maryland, November 6th, 1864. Sir, I wish to impose a few moments on your time by speaking to you after this manner. I have been living, or rather staying, on the bay shore about 7 miles northeast from Annapolis, in the midst of a people whose hearts is black in treason, and a far more fearless people for boldly expressing it lives not outside of the hosts that bear arms in upholding it. Since we the people have proclaimed Maryland should be free, the most bitter hatred has been manifested against the poor devils that have just escaped from beneath their lash. Their actions since Tuesday last indicates to me there is already organized bands prowling upon horseback around the country, armed with revolvers and horsewhips, threatening to shoot every Negro that gives back the first word after they lacerate his flesh with the whip. I have been told by several people, the man by the name of Nick Phipps on last Wednesday, the first son that rose upon the wretch in his freedom after years of bondage, was took in the cellar of Tom Boone's, the postmaster of St. Margaret's. A Negro woman stripped with a cowhide lacerated her flesh until blood oozed from every cut, and she, within a month of giving birth to a child, appeared before court with blood still streaming from her. To cover his guilt, he invents a charge. She is thrown in prison, and he goes free. The same parties caught a man by the name of Foster, 8 miles from Annapolis, handcuffed him, and drove him before them, and they on horse, with such rapidity that when he got to Severn Ferry, he fell upon the beach exhausted, covered with foam. And this man was born free. This man's offense was to say that he nor his wife should be treated in that manner without avenging it. What I've been trying to get at is this. Sam Richardson has taken to Annapolis 4 children of one of his slaves upon the face of the mother's objections in court. He has had them bound to him after she stated that all the clothes that they had on were by her. After night, there was a woman down here by the name of Yule. She is also demanding of the women she has turned without a stitch of winter's clothing, all their children to be bound with her when she cannot get bread for herself. On Friday, there were upwards of hundreds of young Negroes on the ferry with their old masters dragged away forcibly from their parents for the purpose of having them bound. A number of other cases I could cite that I will not bother you with. But in the name of humanity, there is no redress for those poor, ignorant, downtrodden wretches. Is this or is it not involuntary slavery? You may judge what for people they are for every cent they're worth I purchase, and I have to get in Baltimore. They will never lend, give, nor sell me anything, not even a horse to go for a doctor if my wife to be confined. And unfortunately, that occurs every 11 to 12 months. I would not stay here if I could possibly get away. Uncle Sam has got me stuck down here on $350 a year. You may judge how much I save out of that. There's 5 rooms in the house, and each one you can pick up 3 or 4 children. I am the only union man within 10 miles of my residence. You may guess the feelings of my neighbors towards me. Some folks in Baltimore, to see this letter, would hint that it was a father's interest, manifested in young darkies, but it is not so. Every one of them are jet black, and every knot of wool that grows on their heads, both ends, grows in their skull. Therefore, there is no Anglo-Saxon in them. Yours. P.S. Please tender my regards to Archibald Sterling, Esquire, and excuse my familiarity. Tell him I walked 7 miles to Annapolis and back to Baltimore to vote for him. It cost $6. It couldn't do him no good. He will be all right next time. T.B. Davis.
Thank you, Omar. Just give him another round of applause. The next stop on the tour is Annapolis. Stops number 41 through 55. Parole with Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles.
Hundreds of homes were built as a result of the end of it. Thousands of books have been written about it. Millions of children have learned about it. And yes, even billions of words have been uttered about it. Nationally, it's been our nation's stain and disgrace. Internationally, it has caused worldwide and global embarrassment. And beyond this earth and even into outer space, and especially today as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of man walking on the moon, there have been astronauts who have been deeply affected by it. Now, isn't that incredible? So what is it? It is the Civil War. You see, our community of parole played the epilogue role in the Civil War. In many ways, the most important role at the end of this war. Thousands of Union soldiers who had been captured and then paroled by the Confederates were housed here. Soldiers who were on parole agreed to remain in a camp parole, as non-combatants until they were formally exchanged for Confederate soldiers captured by the Union. So as you can see, this war affected thousands of families at the war's end. Hence, a significant line of descendants were never born. Genealogy disappeared. Family trees never took root. However, some soldiers and some civilians stayed in parole. They kept or found jobs here in parole. They married here in parole. They raised their families here in parole. Hence, unexpected descendants were born. Genealogy sprung up. Family trees took root. So this war played an integral role in the development of our community of parole. Unlike any other history that you will ever find or study anywhere, parole's history is unmatched. It has changed the course of history. Now that's incredible. Hundreds of households in parole have directly benefited from his courage. Thousands of students in Anne Arundel County have furthered their education because of his unwavering and long-standing commitment to learning. Millions of educators in our country have directly benefited financially from his ability to see the bigger picture. And billions of words have been used to describe these types of inequalities that he stood up to change. Now, isn't that incredible? So who is he? He is Walter S. Mills. Born in 1908, Walter Lewis Satterley Mills grew up in St. Mary's County. Early on, he was considered to be a Renaissance man. Yes, Walter was different. Principal Mills came to Parole in 1932, where he taught and served as principal at Parole Elementary School for 46 years. Mr. Mills became Al, Mr. Parole. After being at Parole School for only a few moments, Mr. Mills readily saw the inequalities in our county school system, including the inequity in teacher pay. Wasting no time and being afraid of absolutely no one, Principal Mills volunteered, yes, stuck out his neck to be the plaintiff in the 1939 Federal District Court case where he challenged the Anne Arundel County Public Schools policy, which followed the Maryland state statute of paying colored teachers less than white teachers. That case can be found in every law book in the land. Mills v. Board of Education of Anne Arundel County et al., 30 F. Sup. 245, 1939. Mr. Mills prevailed. He was represented by counsel provided by the NAACP, none other than lead attorney Thurgood Marshall, a Baltimore native who in 1967 became the first African-American appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Yes, Parole has a direct historical connection to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall. And Mr. Mills's case was one of the body of cases that preceded the landmark civil rights case Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka in 1954, in which the Supreme Court, 15 years after the Mills decision, declared state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students to be unconstitutional. Attorney Thurgood Marshall took the lead on the Brown case as well. Without a doubt, this Maryland case, with Mr. Mills as the lead plaintiff, was one of the successful seeds sown that led to the Brown decision by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1954. This type of courage that Mr. Mills displayed during this difficult time in our nation's history was unwavering and is unprecedented. Mr. Mills understood, as we all do, that education has been and will always be the linchpin and the cornerstone on which the African-American drive to succeed is founded. So Walter S. Mills played an integral role in the development of our community of Parole, unlike any other history that you will ever find or study anywhere. Parole's history is unmatched. It has changed the course of history. Now that's incredible. And you can read all about this and more in this incredible historical brochure entitled Walk Parole, a scavenger hunt for history, giving you a succinct synopsis of Parole that includes a walking tour with 41 sites. They are on the table as you go out this evening. The development of this brochure was a collaborative project with our community and our city of Annapolis as we celebrated Maryland Day 2016. The information contained in this brochure can also be found on our city's website, www.annapolis.gov. Again, Parole's history is unmatched. It has changed the course of history. Now that's incredible, and now that's Parole.
Isn't that incredible? Thank you, Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles. So we're moving out a little bit. And the next stop on the tour, we're still in Annapolis, but it's stop number 69, Cora's Beach History. You will see a clip from WTTG with Vince Leggett. So as he comes to the stage, I just want to share that this has been a probably project of his that he's probably trying to do about 10 years now, maybe. And I was so excited when my son called me that morning and said, "Are you watching Cousin Vince on TV?" And I'm like, "What is he up to now?" He said, "He's talking about Cora's Beach." So hopefully he'll get to share a little bit about Carr's Beach and Sparrows Beach and Hoppy Adams and Mr. George Phelps and James Brown and Otis Redding and the many other artists and the food that was served along the Pittman circuit. There was also Clover Inn and Dewdrop Inn and Minnie's that Mr. Carl Henson and Mrs. Ramosel Johnson shared with us. And in talking with so many of you all that's here today, I was told that you all remember those places. So Mr. Leggett, come on up. So they're going to do the clip first.
When I was growing up, Ocean City was segregated. I remember being in the water and there was a rope there with balls on it, and you knew that you couldn't go beyond the rope because on the other side of the rope was the white area.
And it was just something about whether it's the water fountains, the beach, the playgrounds, the libraries, the schools, there's something very humiliating about seeing the white-only sign or the color-only sign.
I was probably 8 years old. I didn't know that I couldn't go to these other places.
There was a recent movie called The Green Book that kind of outlined a lot of these different facilities where it was safe for people of color to go. Well, Carr's and Sparrows Beach were one of those places. Here was the 1930s. You had 2 African-American females that owned acreage on the Chesapeake Bay.
It was a source of confidence and empowerment. It's history that many of our people haven't seen.
To see African Americans prevailing against all odds, being educated, business people, hiring people, adding to the tax rolls. They hired many of the local school teachers during this period of segregation where colored teachers were paid less than white teachers.
Carr's Beach was not a confined environment, but it had the air of a festival. So people felt free.
The slogan was black feet and white sand. I mean, that was just so empowering, and no one could tell you to sit down or stand up. You could just come out and enjoy the Chesapeake Bay, enjoy the music, enjoy the food, enjoy the fellowship.
Some of the entertainers that came to Carr's Beach at that time were Count Basie, Ella Fitzgerald, Chick Webb, Duke Ellington,
Ray Charles, James Brown, Sarah Vaughan.
Just to see people of color in charge, running something, was just very empowering to a downtrodden people.
I do feel a little sad that some of these beaches no longer exist, and I understand why, because when integration came, we decided to test all the things that we couldn't go to. They played such an important role, and as long as we don't forget that they existed, we've had some hard times, but we are survivors.
Even with all of those obstacles, as a community, African Americans found ways to prevail, how to strive, how to empower others, how to maximize opportunity. And so I think that message is just as relevant today as it was in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s.
First, I'd just like to say good afternoon to everyone and just thank the county executive, Jane Cox, Lindra, Dr. John Kelly, and one of our partners, Dr. Linda Boyd with the Wally H. Bates Legacy Center. In February, we had put together an exhibit at the Wally H. Bates Legacy Center. It was a joint project between the Blacks of the Chesapeake Foundation and Wally H. Bates. And at that event, we had music, we had food, we had done oral histories, and one of the things that have come out of this aspect of the Cars Beach project was the connection to Wally H. Bates. And Dr. Boyd and others came up during the part of the program and talked about how that was an end of the school year treat to go to the beaches, and people had memories that they worked at the beaches and those kinds of things. One of the things with this particular clip with Fox News, they had representatives that came to the exhibit at the Wally H. Bates Legacy Center and invited us to the studio in Washington, D.C. The black and white and film footage that you saw in the clip is what's really been moving the needle in this segment of the research. Heretofore, we've always worked with a wide collection of black and white and color photographs from the 30s, from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and on up to the beach closing in the 70s. Cardwell Shaheed McMillan saw an ad on eBay saying Cars Beach footage for sale. By Cardwell being a musician, played with the Delphonics and this group and that group, and again, his parents, McMillan's, worked at the beaches according to his story at the oral history program, bid on the footage and won it. It was 16mm film footage from the 30s, 40s, and 50s of the Baltimore Mutual Aid Society that had annual trips to Cars and Sparrows beaches. And so we have been working with this unique and rare film footage for about the last 10 years. We've been using it in exhibits, lectures, oral histories, and so forth. Because what we found is that photographs themselves spur memories. Individuals have donated and shared images of their experiences at the beach. But one aspect of the project that's really getting traction is what foods were sold at the beach, what was in the picnic basket. As my mother said, what you got in the boot of the car. That our aunts and uncles would come up from North Carolina, they would have fried chicken in shoe boxes, sliced cake in shoe boxes. You heard the reference to the Green Book because they were afraid to stop along Route 301. They didn't have 95. They had Route 1 that ran from Florida all the way up the coastline. And so again, the Green Book and what role that played. And so what our hope is to continue to collect oral histories. If you have stories, we're working with, again, Bates Legacy Center, Mellon Archives, Enid Pratt Library online, to continue to document stories. And so if you have stories of your experiences on the beach. Most recently, we worked on a project with the Key School. I know you see Mr. Snowden there, and he's a graduate of Key School as well. And they talked about Mr. Morris Blum and about how when Dr. King was assassinated, that they had riots in Baltimore and Washington, but they had a program on reconciliation on the radio, and young people came down, and Morris Blum opened up the studio where young people can talk about the grievances and their concerns. And so there are several iconic figures that showed up. That was Hoppy Adams, Hoppy's son, Charles Hoppy Adams III from California, participated in the program and shared some of the work him and Deanie Henson are doing around the Hoppy Adams Foundation. George Phelps, Janet Hayes and others. George was an icon at the beach. William Little Willie Adams in Baltimore. And just to roll in with us there today, a sewage treatment plant is where Sparrows Beach was. Chesapeake Harbor is where Cars Beach are. A number of us got together and put together a marker outside. Larry Griffin had Cars Beach reunions down there. So it's a body of work that's going further and further. And so we just invite you and thank the individuals that are coordinating this program to lift up this part of the story. In conclusion, I got a call and an email from some of the Sparrows families, and they always say, well, Vince, I understand about Cars Beach, had the bandstand on Sundays, but stars came to Sparrows as well. They had Ray Charles and Sam Cooke were at Sparrows Beach as well. And so again, this is just a sampling. It's a part of a larger work. I'd just like to thank everyone that's contributed to this, and it's an ongoing project, and we say thank you.
will be mail. Do we have any mail folks in the house? I see a couple of hands. Stop number 2, the African American dormitory at the County Almshouse, which will be read by Mackenzie Adams, and following her, see if I have this right, stop number 3, an unexpected burial in London town. And that's going to be read by Nicholas Ford.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie. I'm reading Mail Stop 2. On this site once stood a frame building which served as the African American group residence for the county almshouse from 1830 to 1910. Before this building was constructed, all residents, African American and Caucasian, male and female, young and old, were housed in the circa 1760 William Brown House. The colonial brick mansion quickly exceeded its capacity for housing the poor. In 1830, orders were given to construct a 40-foot by 20-foot frame building on a stone and brick foundation specifically to provide a racially segregated dwelling for almshouse inhabitants. Portions of the building foundation survive today and are exposed at the ground surface. Archaeology provides important information about the building's construction and design, and artifacts tell the everyday lives of the residents housed here. While the 19th century site is overshadowed by the story of colonial seaport and in the literal shadow of the William Brown House, this archaeological site has the integrity and research potential to be individually eligible and segregation in the not-so-distant past. Sorry. Let me read that again. To be individually eligible for the National Register. The site can also lend new perspective on racial relations and segregation in the not-so-distant past, and yield important information about the evolving treatment of the poor, mentally ill, and disenfranchised in the early 20th century. The 2-room building was in use for 80 years, and various government reports document the poor living conditions of this substandard housing. The building reached such a state of disrepair that it was demolished in 1910. A new dormitory for men of African descent was erected adjacent to the site, a building which survives today.
Good afternoon, my name is Nicholas Ford. An unexpected burial. In 2002, archaeologists discovered the burial of a young child at a circa 1725 dwelling site in the heart of colonial London town. An oval-shaped soil stain near the projected center of a long-gone structure revealed the faint outline of a small coffin and body. All that remained other than the soil stain of the coffin were several teeth that forensic experts determined belonged to a child of African descent, 3 to 5 years of age. The grave shaft ran parallel with the building's floor joists, indicating that the body had been buried under the floorboards and between the floor joists. In 1788, the governor of Barbados wrote about the mortuary practices of those enslaved on the island, noting that it is frequent to enter a near relation under the bedplace on which they sleep, an unwholesome and dangerous practice which they would think it utmost tyranny to alter. Further research revealed that this was a burial tradition that stemmed from Western Africa, including modern-day Ghana, Benin, Nigeria, and Cameroon, a custom that was transplanted into the 18th century to Barbados and Jamaica, with individuals sold into slavery. The tradition then made its way to the colonial seaport of London town. Barbados was a major trading partner with London town in the early 18th century, and land records revealed that this parcel of land was owned by Stephen West, a well-known merchant and importer of enslaved people. These archaeological and historical discoveries strongly to suggest that this site was once home to an enslaved mother and her child. The find also provides a unique opportunity to study the full range of the colonial seaport's population and their life experiences. On May 8, 2003, a ceremony was held to reinter the remains of this child to exactly where he or she was originally found. This unanticipated child's burial opened several interpretive doors, providing a way to connect this place with the larger Atlantic world. It also laid bare a full range of very emotional and personal experiences, helping to humanize those families and people who were enslaved at one day town.
Thank you. Give them another round of applause. And now we're taking it down south a little further. This is our last stop on the tour. And we're moving on down to Columbia Beach, the gym on the bay.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the entire staff connected with this awesome project, and I want to let you know how proud we are to be included as a part of this historic documentation. I also want to give special thanks to Dr. John Keeley, Linda Marshall, and Mr. Anthony Smoot, who, through their encouragement and guidance, helped me to obtain interviews and information. As you view the photos to my left, I must inform you that once I started to gather information, I realized how much I really didn't know about Columbia Beach. I knew of them, but I didn't know about them. I didn't know the complete stories about the parties, entertainment, regattas, and other activities. Many of the residents, sadly, who were able to provide firsthand information about these activities have either passed on, have moved, or are now incapacitated and are unable to share their stories with us. However, today we are very fortunate that Mr. Warren Brooks is with us. His father purchased property in Columbia Beach 1939. So he will be able to share with you the development and some of the progression of this area. As you view the photos also, you will notice that many homes that are shown here were constructed as summer cottages. And this was because African Americans were denied the opportunity to purchase property at other beach areas or summer resort areas. So a lot of the residents came from Memorial Day to Labor Day. My aunts were teachers, and it was well known that at Memorial Day they packed up and they went to Columbia Beach and they didn't come back to after Labor Day. And my two brothers spent a lot of those summers down there. I was kind of a dewdrop-in person. That's why I didn't have a lot of information. Sadly though, what has happened, a lot of the homes now, especially after Isabel, have been reconstructed, rebuilt, and they are now year-round residents. About 80%, I think, of the population now has shifted from being summer residents to year-round residents. And a lot of the home buyers that are coming in now are modifying their homes so that they can stay there year-round. I think we're one of the few families that are still kind of summer residents, and that's because, for one thing, I can't do the cold on the water. I take my hat off to those who can. People have often asked us, you say Columbia Beach, but where's the beach? Well, I last remember going in the water in about 1962, 63. At that time, a jellyfish bit me, and I came out that water, and I haven't been back since. And I'm not going to tell you how old I am now. But due to nature's reconstruction process and erosion and so forth, the beach has kind of just shifted away. However, I understand that there are members on the board who are discussing the possibility selecting another site nearby that area, and they will once again try to have a beach on Columbia Beach. Of all the pictures that you see here, you notice that there are entertainment, there are boat regattas, there are classic musicians. These people had a grand time, and they enjoyed this community. And I think the favorite of photos that I see here is the one at the front gate, the wall that says Columbia Beach, Gem of the Bay. And this is because as a third generation resident, when I look at that wall, what I see is a story of hard work, dedication, community involvement, neighborhood connection, a place to relax, a place to reflect on what it means to have faith in God and overcome obstacles. And most of all, is someplace safe to teach your grandkids how to ride a bike. As to the title, Gem of the Bay, I don't think that I can really put into words what that means. You will have to come and visit and look and see what God has given us to understand what it means to be a resident on the Gem of the Bay. Thank you so much.
Now there's a clip.
All right. First of all, I'd like to say I'm honored to be before this body and giving testimony about Shadyside and Columbia Beach and all the wonderful people and experiences that I've had and other people have had. You know, some things have been kind of sad, you know, but that's just the real world as far as things that, you know, either went on during those times because that was in the midst of segregation. So as you know, that wasn't pretty, but there were people that did want to reach out and mix and, you know, come along. We had a beach right next to our beach. This Columbia Beach was a black beach, but we had Cedarhurst right next door, which was a white community, and they had a great big billboard up there of what they did not want there. One was no Jews, no Negroes, I can't remember everything that they had, but I mean, it was a big list of, but those were really the only ones that really concerned me. So they didn't want us there. We didn't go there. I mean, we had it all down here. We didn't need nothing they had there. Right. You know, as you can see, they coming here. Right. We did. Yeah, but Cedarhurst Road, you know, there was a place called Jim's Country Kitchen, and it was a bar and restaurant. Black people couldn't go there. When black people wanted beer or whatever, they go around to a window around the side of it, and they give you whatever you wanted at that window. But you're not going through that front door. Mm-hmm. If you go through that front door, they try to say that they call it a do-drop in. You drop in, that's it. You don't make that mistake. And I'm quite sure somebody did. That's how they got the reputation. But you know, all in all, basically things were peaceful, except late at night. You just had to know, you know, where you're going and you know who you with. You just didn't mingle and wander, you know. And you know, Avalon Shores, where they had the fire department. Black people, they don't even think about wanting to volunteer because these are all volunteer fire departments. Right. Don't even think about it. Then of course they had the two segregated elementary schools down in Shadyside. Luther G. Scott was what they named the black school. But later on they had Shadyside Elementary, white, Shadyside Elementary, colored. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it was. People would, they would come in, white people would come in and hawk their vegetables and food, no problem. The ice cream man would come in, you know, ain't nobody chasing them out of here. You know, you get that bell, Jack and Jill man is here. And so we enjoyed it. Then of course we had the boat races down here, which brought a lot of, you know, white and black folks together. Yeah.
Thank you to the participants again. To all the interviewees, if you were interviewed for this project, if you can kind of just jump to your feet real quick. I'll leave you with the thought of an old African proverb. When an old man dies, the library burns to the ground, is a popular form of the saying that has also been used by genealogists and historians. The saying means that African oral history is especially valuable and suffers a great loss with the death of each elder. How many times have we said, if I could have just had one more hour with an ancestor, I would have so many questions. Just ask yourself this question. Is there anyone in your life, in your family, that you need to talk to before it's too late? Let's continue the journey. So my time is about up. And I want to thank, again, County Executive Stewart Pittman, our funders, interview participants, and everyone that helped to make this project a great success. As I take my seat, it is in the words of County Executive Stewart Pittman. Thank you. Our success wouldn't have been possible without you. Now let's welcome to the stage Director Janice Hayes-Williams. Before she comes, on behalf of the Lost Towns Project or History Team, I would like to publicly thank County Executive one more time for adding attention to this project that is needed and for sponsoring this public reveal on today. Thank you so very much.
You all are so quiet and so docile. Can you tell me whether you like this or not? This is awesome. My name is Janice Hayes-Williams, and I happen to be a MHAA commissioner who voted for this several years ago. We are continuing to fund projects in the county. Now that I work for Stewart Pittman, I have to recuse myself, but I can give my influence. Before we go, I just, in memory of my family, I wish my parents were here today to see this. Both of them were teachers, and what they would want me to tell everybody is teach the children. This is now a virtual website. When you go home and get out of the pool, when I was a little girl, my mother would let me have friends in the pool. We would get out, she'd have sandwiches and Kool-Aid, and she would pull out the flashcards, and I wanted to die. When they get out of the pool, let them see the website. I also wanted to, Vince talks about Carr's Beach, and I know you all remember my Uncle George Phelps. And just one memory of Carr's Beach that I have to give to you in my Uncle George voice. Welcome to Carr's Beach. If you're from Baltimore or Washington, I hope you left your troubles behind. Because if you haven't, we will beat you so low to the ground, you will need a step ladder to see over the edge of a dime. We miss you, Uncle George. Next steps. While this grant project was focused specifically on the Four Rivers Heritage Area now completed, the Lost Towns team has been working with many of our friends in the North County to expand the virtual tour concept to document historic sites from the Civil Rights era exclusively through oral histories. This project, funded by the National Park Service grant, is ongoing with an anticipated completion date in the fall of 2019.
19, Stewart Pittman is having a real exciting time. Something's happening every couple of months. Clearly, there are many stories to uncover and sites to document. We hope that additional grant funding with people like me who can vote, even being recused, can vote on. And I want to say this, there are many people in the heritage area that do not know how to go out and ask for money. Ask for help. Carol Benson is sitting right down here in front, the director of the Four Rivers Heritage Area, and she will help you and guide you to write grants. We have the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. They give away about $1 million a year. My commission, the Maryland Heritage Area's Authority, we do $6 million a year. We're waiting for you to come and ask for a grant. I'm sorry, I left the script. I get so excited about this stuff. We got so much money, come ask for it. We hope that this tool will be used in the schools. As I mentioned, as a teacher's daughter, it's time to teach the children. When we leave here, we have an assignment for the county executive and the superintendent. We found out that the students can't use YouTube, so we have to find a way to funnel this into the school. And before we leave, there are a couple of people that we didn't recognize that I need to, and that is the Board of Education is here. Can you wave for us in the back there? We have Monique Jackson, Aisha Gillen, and Eve Case with Social Studies. I am looking forward to getting to know Eve Case. My mother was a social studies teacher, and she would want me to share this with you personally, so I'm coming to see you. Carl Snowden is here, Caucus of African American Leaders. We have 2 elected officials, 3, besides Pittman. We have Alderwoman Rhonda Pendell Charles, Alderwoman Shanika Henson, who is here. And then we also have, oh, I haven't been asleep, honestly. Delegate Shanika Henson. And last but not least, I've invited Robert Clark from Historic Annapolis Foundation because we know it's time to tell the stories of African Americans in the city of Annapolis. And I am very glad that you're here today, and we look forward to lifting up this history through HAF. So thank you, everybody. We have some refreshments for you in the cafeteria, cold water. The watermelon was my idea, so don't blame it on Stewart, okay? We have watermelon, cold water. Thank you. There are more stories. We want to talk to you, and we want to hear your story. Thank you so much.